So, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Idris Sunusi from INSA Arts and Crafts, coming to you from many places. Today, we're going to talk about the many places. Yeah, no. Today we're talking about the Page of Wands and the Queen of Pentacles. Now, today's cards is Page of Wands and Queen of Pentacles. The Page of Wands is about a flurry of energy, light. It's about someone, that person that you have in your life that basically just lights up your day. You know, uh, they are most of the time they are fiery people who basically just come in and you feel like the whole place is filled with really joyful and solar energy. And when they're pissed off, things get pretty fucking destructive. The Queen of Pentacles in this case is personified by the mothering figure, the woman that basically, or the man, like could be any of both. It is a person who basically will give you so much love, unconditional. And basically, they would like, I don't want anything from you, just take what you want. Just take what you want. Here you go. And it's not like, take what you want, I don't need you no more. And that dramatic kind of tone, because it might have sounded like that, but no. It's more of like, here is what I have, because it's not mine in the first place, and let's fucking share it. Let's enjoy it. And that's the Queen of Pentacles, really. Now, these are the cards as persons. But if we're going to circumstantiate the person, take the card as a circumstance in itself, we start understanding the cards in the following lessons. The first one is the influence and power of nurturing. Now, people would never, like, I don't know if every man knows this, but a lot of people know this, that women actually lead the world. Men would become presidents and all that kind of thing, but every man, regardless of how powerful it seems to him, it is actually the woman that's giving him the push or pulling him. And that's why we always categorize the emotional man as the lesser man, the one who's in contact with his feminine as the lesser man. But the truth is, if we learn anything about life, is that the way we see the greatest of things is because we want it to overshadow the greatest of things that we hold. And back in the day, in the shamanic days, there's always been shamanic days, there's always been shamans, but when shamans were the people that you would go to get advice, and they were the people who would heal the clan and all that before the muscle man started taking over the place, which was essentially a necessity to save the clan. Uh, but the thing is, when the muscle man or the martial man takes over, his job is to take over to save the clan from war, from the enemy, yada yada yada. And then he should fucking step down. But what happens internally, and before anybody thinks I'm talking about politics here, I'm not. What I'm talking about here is an internal process. An internal process where you get carried away with a certain character. Because you see, you are not one character within your system. You're many selves. And each self has its infinite ability to multiply itself. And to have more, let me just look up the word for a sec. Permutations, yes. Each self has the infinite ability to permutate into different selves. And it's like a really like a domino effect. Like one leads to the other, 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 and inside that person, the marshal or the marshal character is there to protect the system. Is there to make sure that the system gets to its goal with the least or its mission is not really to make the system get to its goal as much as it's the its importance is to protect the system from the other's influence so it can reach its goal. Now, the second aspect, as we were talking about the influence and the power of nurturing, in this case, the one who gets the most nurturing is the one who is doing the most work for the system. The one who gets most praise from the system. And thus, the system considers this identity or that permutation or that image of permutation as that person. Like, this is me. I am that marshal. I am that healer. I am this, I am that. I am this, I am that. All that. And this takes us to something very interesting to look at, which is the 0 and 1, the binary perception of life. Am I this or am I that? And there is a dance that the 1 plays with the 0, because the 1 is not separate from the 0, the 1 is inside the 0. And you see the 0 as a circular motion, but the truth about the 0, it's more of a spiral motion, yet a circular motion at the same time. Depends on where the place that you're perceiving it in the state of motion. Let me simplify this. Let us forget about space for a while. We're always concerned with space. We're always concerned with where are we? But we are not really concerned by how we are moving within that space. And thus we're trying to change a lot in the space, but at the end of the day, the machine is terrible that's within that space. So even the machine, if the machine that is depending on the surrounding circumstance, rather than it being a machine of pleasure, or a machine that's good to look at, it becomes a rusty machine, a very terrible machine, and what it does is it destroys the scenery around it. Even if the scenery is heaven, you can always put the piece of shit in the middle of the cake. So what can you do in this circumstance? In the state of motion, we could realize that, let's say for example, let's look at the number 1. And if we put the number 1 inside the 0, we'll find that the 1 is limited by the angles of the circle, the infinite angle of the circle. However, the 1 can spiral out from any aspect of it and start regressing in memory within that circle. And in that, it pretends to be the trapper. It pretends to be the circle around it, because it would rather perceive the circle as an infinite angle or an infinite curve attached to each other, rather than to perceive that is a circular motion in part of a bigger spiral. And how could you understand that? Or how could you look at that? You could look at that by the understanding that there is more to that spiral than just a circle. And to understand that in order for you to see the spiral, you have to be spiraling as well. It doesn't mean that you become at one with the circumstance, but it means that you get immersed in the circumstance, in the self that fits perfectly with this circumstance. For example, if you have a circumstance where you are given the opportunity to show yourself off as the strongest man, because you have the idea in your head that the strongest man always gets the pussy. Okay? But the funny part about the circumstance is that it's not about shining at that moment. Like if you stopped from trying to, I want this, I want that, and looked at the circumstance, and rather than trying to get something out of the circumstance, you understand that you can share something with the circumstance and make it even more beautiful, you would you would get what you need at that moment. And at this circumstance, I'll use an example from my life. When I used to go to college back in the day, there was this class where we used to do copper plating. And we used to use nitric acid, and we used to use like very caustic material. And the smell of it used to give us a high. And while we were getting that high, I personally was very productive during that high, because I no longer was attached to, I don't want to deal with this person in that way, I don't want to deal with this person in that way. I just let go of my preconceptions and started like opening up to everyone around me. And that increased my productivity, regardless if I enjoyed the plating or not, because I don't think if I was so in touch with the loss of self. Like a lot of people will be like, be in touch with who you are. Be in touch with who you are. Be in touch with yourself. Be in touch with your desire. Be in touch with... Fuck that shit. Have you ever tried being in touch with no self? With nothing? Being in touch with nothing? Well, you can say that we can never perceive nothing, so how can we be in touch with it? And that's the point exactly. Because if you are trying to be in touch with a certain desire, what you will do there is you're going to get obsessed about this desire, and you'll never manifest it except in stress and pain. And if you obsess, and if you go away from that obsession and you try to cling onto any form of attractive material around you, what will happen in this circumstance is that you will lose your will completely and your identity. So it's a lose-lose circumstance when you're trying to focus either on your desire or on the surrounding. But the win-win in this circumstance would be let go and discover what you want. Because the thing is, you always know what you want. It's just that you don't want to take responsibility for it. And when someone offered you something different, you were like, oh, you are giving me the information and the knowledge for me to get something different, and me leaving behind what I want to achieve in the first place. And thus the loss of discovery, and thus the loss of purpose, and thus the loss of all that kind of stuff. So we could say that the path of memory gets internalized and externalized in the sense of the desire to remember what we wanted in the first place. Now this could cause a lot of cognitive dissonance. And the cognitive dissonance in this case would be that you would want to discover what your forefathers, your grandparents, your ancestors, going back and back and back and back, what did they want by coming to this earth? And it becomes a very confusing method of thinking, because you, in that state of mind, you're going through a lot of mythologies and a lot of lores, and you're no longer getting the advantage of the lore or the mythology, but rather you are worshipping the mythology itself. And there's nothing wrong with worship as long as you're worshipping another human being in love and sexuality and kindness. But there is something that's asphyxiatingly wrong when you are worshipping something that doesn't exist in the first place, without you knowing that you actually want it to exist. And what I mean by that is that when you are dealing with a circumstance, When you are dealing with a circumstance, and you are dealing with the understanding, excuse me for the interruption, when you are dealing with a circumstance, and you are dealing with the understanding of the self, as we said earlier, about which self fits within which circumstance, you have to understand that each self comes from a certain background that's inside of you, you know. Like, for example, let's say the martial self. The martial self comes from the understanding of war, of terror, of opposition, of kill or be killed. It's a very, very, very vindictive self, but it's there, and you shouldn't demonize it. Because demonizing it will turn that self on you, and the last thing you want to turn on you is a self that could get very destructive. And actually, um, you could. I remember the love of my life saying um, that cancer is viewed upon as a way of the system internalizing shame and guilt and wanting to self-destruct. And you could see that in selves too, where you basically just look at things in the certain sense that there is, let's say, the red self. It is called the red self in chaos magic. The red self, essentially what it does is it protects the system from outside influence so as to increase the possibility of survival. And if it reaches to the limit of survival, then you know you're doing something wrong. Because because if you look around you, and you'll find the possibilities of you finding luxury and pleasure in this world is much easier than previous ages. And if you're looking for survival, then you are not because your matters are expiring, but the truth is that you are losing contact with what's making you alive. So initially you feel dead, so you are thriving to keep yourself in survival mode and scarcity mode. So figure out what in your life is causing you to do that, and just either try to influence it to like to get with you in that dance, or by all means, and usually it's not a person, it's usually a circumstance or a social circumstance. And in this case, either get with that person in that dance of survival, so you could actually move out of that area into another area of being alive and thriving and enjoying your life, or you're going to stay in survival mode where you are always just emitting and fusing a lot of adrenaline, which essentially we can see this in our lives in people who are always in work mode. I am guilty of being one of those people where basically I used to not be able to just sit down doing absolutely nothing. I had to be always on edge and doing something, always keeping my hands busy because survival mode. I gotta survive. I gotta. But the funny thing is, if you come to look at the matter, is that if you're going to die within the next minutes, would you rather be in survival mode or actually enjoying your life, talking to the love of your life, or um, playing the game that you always like playing, enjoying playing music, doing art, whatever it is that you most enjoy? What is it that if you would die while you're doing it, you'll die smiling? Think about that, and then you will understand what you would like to spend your life doing. Now, in that self, we've talked about the martial self, the red self. And you can actually, of course, in chaos magic, And if there's this that you can, and if you don't work with chaos magic, or you didn't read about chaos magic, go read Peter J. Carroll, a book called Liber Chaos, and he goes in depth about the eight selves, the understanding of the eight selves. But so as not to repeat what others have written, go check this book out. It's called Liber Chaos. However, there is something that this writer has said, or this magician has said. He said, and I don't remember the specific quote, but it means a god left unnoticed turns into a demon. And essentially, that's what I'm talking about. If a self takes over excessively, it becomes a demon, becomes a cause of obsession, and it leads the person out of it's a very miserable life, really. And we can see that in very imbalanced people and imbalanced countries as well, where a certain aspect of the country is taken over all over the country, and you can see the imbalance. And you could see that that there is a certain imbalance in the way of dealing with things in every country. Like you have a certain country that's basically, for example, America. America is about the American dream and business and flourishing and all that kind of stuff. But you come to talk to people, they are just overly encompassed by the making of money. And they like, I make money because I want to feel successful. Why they feel successful? Because it's a good feeling. Okay, but what other aspects of your life do you enjoy having? I don't know. Just give me the money. Capitalism had made it this way. And then you could go, for example, for Middle Eastern countries. Middle Eastern countries are excessively martial. You know, excessively martial. And honestly, if you want to make a buck in a Middle Eastern country, just go sell them fucking weaponry. You know, um, and for absolutely no reason. What the fuck are you gonna do with weaponry in the first place? You know, but they fucking love having weaponry. Oh, there might be a war. There might be a war. There might be a war. Haven't you ever considered that the one selling you the fucking weapons is the one who is profiting the most from the fucking war? You dumbass. And then saying, oh, there's another country that's fucking with you. Oh, there's another country that's fucking with you. Oh, there's another country that's fucking with you. Who's making the money here? Dumbasses. Now, we have been talking right now about the power of, we've been talking about the Page of Wands and the Queen of Pentacles. And we've went in depth about the power of nurturing and how the selves go around each other to nurture a system. But the thing is, when it especially comes to men, we externalize the women outside of our system because we have had our feminine aspect oppressed. And a lot of men would be, and men, you'd find men actually, like very macho men and all that, they would actually get with women who are not so powerful. They would get with women who are very weak, or women who are weakened, and they would be and you could see that as well in them become festering as narcissism, where they end up draining that woman. And don't worry about it before someone is like, you're talking about in favor of women here. No, yeah, I love women, but I'm going to talk about men in just talk about like women who are doing the same thing onto men. And in this case, men oppressing women in the sense of like, yes, you are you are an object. You are this, you are that, you are this, you are that, you are this, you are that, you are this, you are that. And you don't have freedom to choose this, you don't have freedom to choose that, and all that kind of stuff. And this is an externalization of the man's oppressed feminine aspect, because he oppresses his feminine aspect by because he is always in scarcity mode. He is in the state of, I don't have the time to feel emotions. I don't have the time to feel my pain. I don't have the time to to be in love with myself. I don't have the time. I don't have the time. I don't have the time. Well, what do you have the time for? Because at the end of the day, are you serving your system, or are you just, you forgot who you are? And I don't mean who you are in the sense of who you are, because we already talked about this in the beginning of the video extensively. No, I mean in the sense that what did you, how can I put this into words? Who you are as in your attachment to the circumstance that you're in. Who are you in that circumstance? And for you to know who you are in that circumstance, you have to be at balance. Because otherwise what will be happening there is you are going to be a feather in the wind. Because you would want to do anything but look at yourself. Because essentially, for you to look at yourself at that moment, you would have to become very emotional. And if you become very emotional, you would get into a certain state where people would look at you in the sense of, oh, he's the lesser man. He's a faggot. He is. And the words just are endless. So what happens there? Men oppress each other, and thus they oppress women. Now let's talk about women oppressing men. My favorite subject. Let's play the role of the victim, shall we, ladies, gentlemen? Or in martial conversation, ladies. When you are dealing with, and then women oppress each other, thus they oppress men. Oh, you don't look so nice. Baby, how do you, and all women, like, when they sit together and they start judging their choices about men. Yes, I was raised amongst women, so I've seen this shit happening as a child. Um, and then you would realize that this woman would start dissing that man, and that woman would start dissing that man. And the funny part about it is that all those women want that man, but they start dissing him so that the woman will start dissing her man, and now, oh shit, she just dissed her man, and then all the women won. And essentially it's because they also as well live in that mentality of scarcity. They continue on forgetting that there is more, there is enough to fucking go around. And that's because essentially the cycle here is that the woman has been oppressed by that man, and the woman has been oppressed by that man, and thus she's oppressing her masculine aspect, which has been oppressed by her father, which essentially, when it was oppressed by her father, it's basically, oh, you can't be more masculine than me, bitch. And then she goes, instead of going in a dance of love between her and her husband, or her masculine counterpart, be it a man or a woman like her, what happens there is a very destructive dance. It's a very destructive dance where the man hates the woman and the woman hates the man, and they try to have this misunderstanding of power, of rather who can actually have more power in the relationship to lead it to more fruition. And there is a competition of power. It's called the pecking order. And if you don't look at it, you are blinding yourself, because you would like to stay in the you don't want to go through that challenge. But there is a pecking order, and there is a competition of power. And it's very unconscious, and sometimes it's very conscious, depending on the relationship and the parties of the relationship and how powerful they are over themselves. And I don't mean powerful over themselves in the sense of oppression. I mean, as I said in one of my first lessons, power as in power to understand yourself. So what happens there is that you end up chasing power over the relationship to oppress the other. And in this case, you're no longer uh, in love with that person. and then you would actually work on the relationship to survive, rather than working on working on yourself and your spouse or your lover as your beloved, your friend. And this leads us to the next part of our lesson today. And yes, today is going to be one lesson, but a very long one. Um, and this is about, in this part of the lesson, since we're talking about the Page of Wands and the Queen of Pentacles, really, this part of the lesson we are talking about the attraction. So let's say you got your shit balanced out. You got all yourselves in check. Because before you want people to serve you, or to serve, and you need to, like, because honestly, no one would serve you. Um, what you would want, rather than focusing on who serves my purpose or who doesn't serve my purpose, is to make the purpose lucrative enough for the selves within you to serve it gladly. Because each self is inhabited by multitudes of spirits. Multitudes of spirits. You are a tottering kingdom of heaven and hell, as Austin Osman Spare says. And those spirits could be very angelic in nature and very demonic in nature, very creative and very destructive. How could you make that purpose so lucrative that it would attract this aspect and this aspect of those selves? Well, I'll leave it to your creative imagination to do so. However, if you are able to make the circumstance that you want to be in so lucrative for all the aspects of yourself to pull you to do what is ever necessary to get there, you are becoming lucratively attractive enough for the circumstance so that the circumstance will grab you. And it becomes this magnetic pull between the self and the circumstance. But remember, while you're doing this, you are creating opposition on both aspects. So what you want to do is that to give that circumstance in your imagination, to give that self in your that circumstance in your imagination a role. What I mean by a roll, or like a dice roll, is like that. Okay, so basically I want to, for example, let's say I want to build a company. Okay, this company, the first permutation that you would want to have through that company is that this company would be, for example, producing juice, producing juice boxes. The second permutation is that you want that juice boxes to be distributed all over the world. The fourth permutation is that you want that that juice to actually to like, you want that juice, for example, to permutate into something else. Let's say to create machines in the middle of gardens where you can have certain juice, or whatever the ideas that come up. So essentially what you're doing there is you're making the idea, like you're benefiting the idea as it benefits you. And this has a causal effect where you are being attracted towards the circumstance that you want to go to, and at the same time the circumstance itself is growing. So there is a bigger possibility, because if there is a bigger possibility for something to grow somewhere, it will manifest. But if a place does not nurture this into growing, what happens is that you become putting energy into thin air. You're distributing your energy. And what that does is it attracts people from around you who would be like, oh, I see that you are distributing your energy for absolute nothing. Let me suck on that energy. And you start serving, other characters, and you're like, give them this, give them that, give them this, give them that, give them this, give them that. And what happens in this circumstance that you might learn a bit of a skill here, a skill there, but is this the skill that you wanted to learn in the first place? Because if the space does not offer the fruition of the circumstance and the motion that we talked about earlier, then you are doing your motion in the wrong space and in the wrong time. And thus you are in scarcity mode, because you feel that you're expiring all your material and you are not benefiting anything from it. A very important part of magic is understanding the geography that you're working in, is understanding the, shall I say, the energetic geography that you're working in. You can't expect to cast for getting laid in a mosque or in a church unless you are going to get married. You don't expect that you are going to have a casting for fucking a shitload of women in a place of religion. Doesn't work like that. Go to places that give power to your desire. Give places that accredit your desire as something that is beneficial for them. Because otherwise you will be feeding on opposition. And feeding on opposition, there's nothing wrong with it, but in minimal terms. But more than the minimal terms, what happens there is that actually you are just attracting opposition to destroy you, because you have lost all hope. And that's not because you have lost all hope. That's because you are like, okay, so this place is not good for me. So how do you nurture? And this is how you nurture circumstances. You nurture circumstances and you nurture yourself in the process. And while you're doing that, what you're doing is you are attracting the circumstance. You are going to the circumstance, and the circumstance is attracting you to it. As you make all aspects of the circumstance lucrative for all aspects of yourself. This is the lesson of the day. And probably it's going to be one lesson today. I don't think I'll say anything today. I've said enough today. So this is INSA Arts and Crafts. May no order hinder you, and may chaos be your authority. I love you guys. We love you guys. Talk to you later.